We've got an awesome pair of guests on EP right now. A couple of guys that I've been wanting to bring to the show for a long time. Sam Kennedy and James Mielke from Tigertron. Welcome, gentlemen. It is good to see you guys.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Good to see you. Where are you right now?
We're in New York.
You're in New York. You're in Tiger.
And we're in the basement of James's apartment, which is our studio.
Very cool. And a lot of games out there are made in garages and basements and home offices. You know, like even Devolver doesn't have a big, studio space. Everybody kind of works from wherever they can work from these days, and kind of speaks to the nature of sharing code and sharing development across the internet, right? Which is a big part of Jupiter and Mars, isn't it?
Yeah, we're living that life right now. Yeah, one day when we're beaming our from a penthouse studio somewhere, we'll let you know. But yeah, right now we're keeping it low key, just because that's a fiscally responsible way to be an independent developer.
Yeah,
people want to.
Also, yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
To add to that too, though, but to your point, I think that's really what we also. What we wanted to do with the studio too. We don't want to be this like giant, game developer with, have to hire tons and tons of people. Mainly because there's a lot of great talent out there that we've wanted to work with that aren't just based in New York. For instance, the two developers we've been working on with for Jupiter and Mars, they're actually based in Australia. And they're an awesome bunch, Wicked Witch and Tantalus, and we've always wanted to work with them, so kind of like the stars aligned for this project.
Well, and you guys know, you've been covering entertainment, you've been covering the video game scene for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of creators out there that work out of their home studio, and some of the biggest effect shots and some of the coolest kind of effects work that we even see in movies is often kind of subcontracted to one person that works on stuff. And I remember, I forget the guy's name, he did the title sequence for Saw, and he was the hot, sought after visualist, but he just worked from home, and all of these movie studios would just give him shots and just say, go and work from home and just do it that way.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful life.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, if you can have the creativity and the comfort of your own surroundings all at the same time, there's not really much better than that.
That's awesome. How did you guys meet?
We met actually way back in the day, probably 1999, I think it was, when we were both working at GameSpot at the time. I'd moved out to San Francisco to work there. James was still here in New York freelancing originally, and then you moved out as well.
The first time Sam got on my radar was when I submitted a story to a news story to GameSpot, because I covered the Japanese gaming scene then. Yep. I sent them the story, and then it went up on the site with Sam's name in the byline. I was like, who the blank is this Sam Kennedy guy? That's
always stealing credit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice work, Sam.
Yeah.
Is that the way the game is coming together too?
Yeah.
Jupiter and Mars by Sam Kennedy.
Now, James, I've known you forever because you were actually on early seasons of EP. I think we had a deal with EGM back in the day, and we went and covered. We got expert sort of observations from you, and we put you in a bunch of episodes. I remember back then. Did you see a career for yourself making games then? Was that the dream, or did you want to stay in journalism, but journalism kind of died all around you?
What's funny is that I never really had any designs on getting into the game industry in particular. It just sort of happened because I did a couple fan reviews for fun on the internet, but I tried to write them in a very maybe more mature, editorially responsible way. Yep. And then GameSpot saw them online, and then they contacted me through my email link. This was the wild west of the internet, but they had my email link, and they wrote me and said, hey, would you like to write for GameSpot? And that one thing led to another, and that's just how it ended up coming to be. But as far as games are concerned, it seemed like a natural or logical kind of transition, because I don't think I was never a writer. If I've ever done any solid work as a writer, it's just been through sheer enthusiasm. But I think I've always been an illustrator, so making games as a way to bring characters and ideas that I have to life. So it just sort of, as long as you have the motivation to try and put these things together, that's what came of it.
But you can't get the games journalist out of either of us, really. James especially still does a lot of occasional freelance writing and
I still do stuff for some sites or magazines for fun, just because I get to talk to developers that I've never spoken to before. So if something like that pops up, I'm always there.
Yeah. It's fun to bang the drum, isn't it? And kind of spread the word about this interesting medium that has so many stories to tell out there. This is your first game, right, Sam? You haven't shipped a game before?
Yeah, no, not from the developer side. I worked in marketing with Edelman and Activision for a whole bunch of years. Building kind of community around Destiny and Call of Duty and all of that. But from an actual hands-on development standpoint, no. And it's exciting. It's I finally understand, I think, why games are so difficult to make.
We kept on saying, can we make this a little bit more like Gunstar Heroes?
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, no, that's a different game.
No, I mean, it was, I think similarly, I don't know that I ever set out to, make that chart my career to, write about games and then develop games, but it just sort of, I love new challenges, and I love games, and I love now the being afforded the opportunity to work on them, and just sort of definitely the last 2 years have poured pretty much all of my energy and just everything into this game. So I hope it turns out really well and people love it, but it's very different than in the past where, let's say if you were writing an article, even working on a magazine, or, it was sort of, once you were done with it, it was just sort of, that's it, you were kind of, it's very linear almost in a way. And, game development is so iterative, I guess. There were so many things that I learned along the way where, we made this one change and then something else changed in the game. And we had to kind of, always decide what's the best, what do we not want to do also.
Yeah. James, you worked with Tetsuya Mizuguchi and he's a friend of yours and a collaborator, and apart from Rez and all of this in Space Channel 5, he's also just one of these diehard Sega geniuses that worked. Didn't he do Sega Rally? Wasn't that one of his games?
Yeah, Sega Rally.
Yeah. So how much did you?
Card Championship.
Incredible. How much did you learn from him? And now you're kind of that conduit to that experience. And do you find yourself sharing that with people like Sam and your partners in Australia?
Yeah, there are certain lessons I learned when I was at Q Entertainment working on Child of Eden and Luminous Electronic Symphony. Our whole concept was synesthesia, which is a psychological condition, but the way we look at it is for every action that you put on screen, there has to be a visual and an audio reaction, so that way the player feels maximum feedback, right? So on a purely mechanical level, we're always trying to do those things to make sure that every time you do something, you've done something, so that you have that player feedback, and so you're more engaged about it. From an aesthetic perspective, as you'll see in Jupiter and Mars, there's a lot of neon kind of deep, high contrast, glowing visuals and stuff. And that's an extension of the things that we did in Child of Eden, and of course Luminous. And those are things that that's an aesthetic that I'm personally interested in, 1980s Tron aesthetics, Tempest, the whole vector graphics movement, that stuff.
You're speaking my language, James.
Exactly. Blip, blip, bleep, bloop, blop. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And yes, we do make a conscious effort to bring that into what we're doing now and hopefully in the future as well.
Has Mizuguchi-san played Jupiter and Mars? And I'm curious what he thought of the game.
Yeah, that's actually just what I was going to say. It was we showed it to him last summer, I think it was. And it was sort of like a career/life highlight to see him playing this game that we'd been working on. And
he had these goggles on. He was literally reaching out to touch manta rays floating overhead. And what did he call it? beautiful marine adventure or something like that. It was really hysterical the way he just sort of like bust out this little phrase describing the game. But yeah, it was great to show it to him.
Yeah. That's awesome. So it's a hard thing to ship one of these things, and Sam, you are learning that firsthand. I think, James, you've probably gone through the ringer a few times, so you probably
trying to Gray
talk. Yeah, you're talking Sam off of the ledge there. No, it's going to be okay, but it's
like,
imminent.
Don't jump, Sam, don't jump.
It's imminent, and you guys are about to ship. So, are you able to exhale now? Or are you able to kind of just celebrate the reception of the game? How do you feel right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we're exhaling just yet. But no, I mean, honestly though, it's tough because when the game is pretty much done. We're still actually working on a couple last like patch updates for it. But but really for us, it's sort of like I just want people to be able to play it right now as opposed to like waiting till next week.
Well, when does it goes up on Monday, right? Yeah, Earth Day in North America. Europe and Japan follow very, very shortly after that. But once we start getting feedback and stuff like that, if people are having a good time, I think that's when we can let some of the air out. But up until that point, we're like, So.
I will say, and this has been a little bit weird for me too, but so I've been playing basically the game every single day for the last like year and a half, and with the point of being able to do a lot of testing, see how things are coming along, all of that, a lot of bug testing in the later stages. As of late, I still actually find myself playing the game, and I don't know. I think it's just more out of like now habit. I feel like me playing it more will make it better somehow or something like that. But I do think maybe it's a testament to that. I am really happy with the way it turned out, and like I hope like people will actually try to find every last treasure in the game and every last little detail that we put into it.
We've had the game at a lot of public events around the world, and the best feeling though is like when we see a really diverse crowd of people playing the game and walking away with smiles on their faces. It's certainly something you have to play. And if you do have VR, because it's playable both ways, if you do have VR, you should definitely try it in VR, because I think that is the way to play it.
Yeah.
We can count the number of games that we've been able to play as a Dolphin on one hand.
That's true.
And so, what was the pull for you guys? Why did you want to play as Dolphins, and why was this an important artistic creation to share with the world? And why was VR the medium of choice to kind of get it to everybody? Although you can play without VR, I think this is really about a VR experience, though, too, right?
Yeah, when I first came up with the idea, it was actually more around 2011. I was actually still working.
2011.
2011. Yeah, today is brought to you by 2011.
I was still working at Q Entertainment. I just moved to recently to Tokyo, and I had seen the movie The Cove, which is about an annual dolphin culling in Taiji, Japan.
Oh, I couldn't watch that movie. I remember that. Yeah,
right?
I hovered over it and I'm like, nope, I can't watch that.
It's gut wrenching. But what the documentary filmmakers do is really, really impressive. So there is an element of hope, and because of the fact that they raise awareness, through their medium, through this filmmaking medium, that inspired me to do something with games. I thought like, well, why aren't we using games to bring attention to to issues and in a cool way that a whole new realm of gamers like that might be tuning out documentaries. Maybe they'll be more engaged if they see this information in a game. Yeah. So that's where I started thinking about like a game about dolphins, and then for some reason I was listening to Frank Sinatra, and I was listening to Fly Me to the Moon, and then he's got that line, I wonder what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars, and I thought that would be a name for like two characters. Like I was just like, all right, let's just go with it. There's no real deep thought process behind it, but that's where it came from. Yeah. So
and I think on the VR front, I think for us it was like VR was this huge inflection point in gaming. Just a new way to tell stories and actually you know, put yourself into the environments. And, you know, it's, especially for this game too, you know, when you're swimming through, you know, submerged London or New York, you know, that just even from day one, when we were thinking about what could Jupiter and Mars be, you know, that idea in VR was just really powerful to us. And, you know, so we basically started there and built off of that.
A quick metaphor is like when you watch a movie like, you know, Planet of the Apes, and you see the Statue of Liberty on the beach at the end, right? You watch it on a TV, it's like, okay, cool, like I get it, striking imagery. But if you're able to put a headset on and jump into the movie and be right there with the Statue of Liberty on the beach, that's the difference, you know. And Sony saw that too, because up until that point, they didn't have anything like that in their catalog, and they thought, wow, this would be so good in VR, so let's do this.
Yeah, it really does feel like Sony is doubling down, if anything, on VR. I mean, they just had their VR video reveal. They've got Iron Man coming out. We know that there's some VR plans for PlayStation 5.
Yep.
Why do you think VR is so important to Sony, and what has it been like working with Sony? Because I know they've been a great big partner for you guys.
It's been pretty amazing working with Sony. I mean, they have just been so supportive, like not only North America, but Europe and Japan as well. So we're really getting a lot of global support, which for a small group like us, it's a huge, huge difference. And that just says a lot about their, you know, it's not just lip service at E3, they're really helping support independent developers. Why is VR so important to the future? I don't know. I think it's from my perspective, it's just a really awesome new medium. I mean, it resets everything. If you made Pac-Man in VR, and all of a sudden you're the one running down the hallway, and you turn a corner and there's
heart
Blinky
attacks
there, right? That's just amazing. You can take the simplest game concept and it just reinvents everything. But besides, there's so much more potential and upside that hasn't been tapped yet.
Yes.
So once those things start happening, I mean, you don't want to not be there. So I think by that virtue.
Yeah, and like all the other technology too, like once the form factor keeps getting better and it's untethered and all that, like VR is just going to keep getting way better, more and more people playing with it. So I think Sony's smart to be investing heavily into it, and you know,
Nintendo is in on this now. Nintendo has VR.
Sony's not alone. So obviously, if Nintendo's dipping their feet in, then they must be on the right path. And Oculus is still in it, you know, and there is other VR makers as well. So I think it's something that's going to stick around for, you know, until it proves itself.
Awesome. Blake is an amateur oceanographer, I think. He says, can the Dolphins get stoned on pufferfish?
Yes, they can.
They can?
Yes, they can.
Whoa.
If we had a little bit more time and a little bit more budget, we probably would have put a mode in where every time you ate a pufferfish, you would have gone on a psychedelic trip. But that might have to wait for a sequel.
The game looks like a psychedelic trip.
Fingers crossed.
I'm curious, you know, you guys put in some true sort of gamer sort of missions and things like this. It's not just all experiential. It feels to me like, was there an argument about that back and forth? Were you trying to just sort of float and be the Dolphins, or were you saying, no, we've got to give gamers real quests? They got to go and save things. They got to go and you know, bash through things and discover things.
It was always designed and destined to be a real game, so to speak. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to strip back everything that was inessential. We didn't. Our biggest probably gamey thing is like what we call the heart ring, which is just a very simple sliver, like with a kind of a quest pointer, and then also a marker that shows you where Mars is in relation to you. But other than that, we didn't want to have a HUD because we didn't want to have things that a dolphin wouldn't have, for example. So we tried to keep it as organic as possible, but there is a very Metroid kind of progression through things. Things are gated. You have to get certain power-ups like aqualung in order to go deeper into the ocean, because dolphins in real life only stay about 30 feet from the surface. Right. So in order to go deeper, you have to obtain an ability that lets you go deeper.
Yeah, I think for us too, it's like we wanted to make a game like the games that we love. To be honest, like it's, there you can, if you play it, you'll definitely see. You know, like I think players will definitely see a lot of those inspirations, whether it's you know, Metroid or whatnot. yeah, I think there was like trying to find that right balance of letting people just explore on their own versus holding their hand at the right places. That was something that we spent a lot of time maybe not arguing about, but just trying to finesse it and get it just right. Yeah.
So there's a real mystery to kind of uncover as you're diving deeper and going farther into the game.
Yeah. There are things that are hidden in the depths of our future ocean, and I think there's a lot of cool things to find. But hopefully, what people will walk away with is the feeling that they played a game with memorable characters and a memorable outcome, and that they'll think about it in the future just the way we think about our favorite games of the past.
Right. And I guess I would say too, like I hope that we kind of had to experiment a little bit as we were trying to tell some of the story through kind of in-game VR cinematics. And I'm very curious, when we talk about what kind of waiting on reception and stuff like that. I'm very curious how people respond to that, and hopefully everybody really enjoys it. But I think we were, let's say, somewhat experimental in that respect. So I'm excited to let people kind of really experience some of those story scenes, especially later in the game, in VR.
Awesome. Have you guys been in touch with the designer or anybody that worked on Echo the Dolphin?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. Ed Annunziata, is that
how
you say his name?
Yeah.
We have not been. I actually reached out to him one time to see if he'd be interested in doing like kind of a roundtable, just because we did have like this thing in common, but I hadn't heard back from him, so that didn't happen. But
let's make that happen. I think that'd be incredible. I would love to see that.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. But I've never, oddly, he was like one of the few people, well, not few, but like one of the people I never got a chance to talk to when I was, writing about games.
Same.
Yeah, no.
Yep. I've never met him either, but he is coming up right. He's got a new Space War game or something like that out there right now. Yeah. So
maybe you can make this happen.
I'll try. I think that would be rad. I think it'd be fascinating. And my last question is about the Save the Ocean element of this game, and I'm wondering if you are working with any organizations. You've got it being developed in Australia, and they've got their threat against the coral reef down there. Keeping our oceans healthy, I think, is a very important endeavor for all of us on Earth. But I'm wondering if you're working with any groups to kind of help spread the love and the message around your game.
Yeah, we're working with two organizations. Sea Legacy is the first, and the Ocean Foundation is the second.
Cool. And
both of those organizations they don't really overlap in what they do. Sea Legacy raises awareness through their photography exhibits, and they do a lot of things, but primarily they draw attention to these the issues facing the planet with photography. It sparks conversation. The Ocean Foundation has an initiative where they actually raise money to plant seagrass, because seagrass absorbs most of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which basically makes our planet livable. So both of their missions are incredibly important, and we've worked with both of them. Both of those video games are not the easiest thing to communicate to people who don't play video games.
Absolutely.
So the fact that both of these organizations were willing to work with us and take a chance on sharing their message with a huge untapped audience, speaks a lot to their, their progressive outlook, and they were like, okay, we understand that this could be very important, because you change a few minds, or you raise awareness with the right people, they can take that passion into their own lives and help in their own ways. So for us, that was really important, not only for the credibility, but also because that literally is part of our mission.
That's awesome.
One thing too is that Christina Mittermeier, the co-founder of Sea Legacy, she actually does the narration in the game.
Oh, wow.
She loved the story so much, and wanted to be a part of the game actually. So we got her to.
Which is great, because one, we have a woman's voice in our game. She represents the narration of the characters, the tribe of ancient Wales in the game called the Elders, which is almost like a Native American tribe passing down the legend of Jupiter and Mars through the ages. Yeah. And the way she actually says the story is just really cool. I get goosebumps every time I hear her narration. It's so good.
But we also we also do want the game to give back as well. Like we are actually going to donate some of the profit to the ocean organizations that we work with.
That is amazing, you guys. I've got a question here from SamIam111. How does your game separate itself with other Dolphin-led games? It's a good question. How do the controls for your game separate itself from other Dolphin types of games out there?
Well, for one, you are controlling two characters. You're controlling two characters at once, somewhat in the way that you control two characters in Eco, or you're holding a person's hand in Eco. In Jupiter and Mars, you're playing as Jupiter from first person. You have certain abilities that you utilize from her perspective, especially the echolocation, which lights up and scans the area. But you also have Mars on the trigger. So anytime you need like him to do something very action oriented, you send him to ram open a gate or a door or a shell to unlock a treasure or something like that. So you are in control of both characters, which I think is a pretty unique dynamic. And considering how few Dolphin games there are, I think that's pretty much it right there.
Well, and plus you put the headset on and you are the Dolphin. It's
right.
It's an awesome idea, you guys, and you know, I have to congratulate you on making this dream a reality. I'm very curious to see how the game does for you, but also, is it too soon to ask you what you're working on next? Can you give us a tease? Is it going to be another VR game?
Well, what I will say is that we are working on a concept that still exists within our shared universe. I mean, you know, we spent so much time crafting this sort of future Earth to show like what. You know, it's like an I Am Legend thing, right? It's like after mankind disappears for a certain amount of time, how does the planet start to reclaim itself? The next concept that we have, and pretty much all future concepts for the foreseeable future, will take place on this planet and explore different facets. So this one is in the ocean. The next one might be on land or in the sky, but it's going to show the planet from a very, very unique perspective from the eyes of different creatures.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. You guys keep it up. Very, very happy for both of you and proud of both of you, and can't wait for people to get their hands on this game. I'll have some thoughts on it after I get a little bit deeper, no pun intended. But thank you so much for joining us. James Mielke and Sam Kennedy. Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much, Nick.